What's happening, fandoms?
Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here,
We react to music videos and shows.
today we're going back to our series of breakdowns from Eric Voss at the new Rockstars. If you're not familiar with Eric and his team at the new Rockstars, they do amazing breakdowns and analysis of all the intellectual properties that you care about, including The Mandalorian. And this one is for season 3, episode 5.
I'm sure we missed some.
I'm sure there's amazing things to find here, so let's let Eric tell us about them.
Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 5, Chapter 21, The Pirate. From the Orbish on Zeb's vest, to how those pilots' billiards game is a deep cut to A New Hope, sound effects reused from Return of the Jedi, and coming back to Zeb here, hidden details in his VFX design that make him look so good. Let's break down this scene by scene for every last Star Wars Easter egg and subtle visual detail that you might have missed. And big thanks to Boxu for sponsoring this video. More on their tasty offerings later. We open on the pristine gates of Navarro. These were in ruins in season 1, so now their repairs this season were a big deal until this episode. The statue of IG-11 in the plaza remains disassembled from Din and Grief's attempt to reboot him with the Anzellans in chapter 17, and since Din was unable to find a new chip, they really seem to have dropped this. But we'll see if IG-11 comes back in these final few episodes. Grief Karga's city map labels 3 spots in Orbesh on the left, East Court in the middle, Pole, Cushion, and on the right, Landing Yard. But this planning session gets interrupted when Grief looks down at the plaza to see a shadow moving across the yard. And for a second, we think it's an Imperial Star Destroyer, but it's actually Gorian Shard's Cumulus-class Corsair battleship. The name Corsair comes from Legends, the 2005 Dark Lords of the Sith comic with Dark Horse. The Corsair was a Daraphin-class Sith battleship with Sith crystals that could tear out the core of a star. The design of the ship does pay homage to that with its hooked nose, like a bottle opener, or the beak of a bird digging for prey. The Cumulus class takes its name from the cumulus clouds. Those are the white puffy types of clouds that fill the sky. Now this ship's hull seems to be painted in a camouflage design. You ain't exactly camouflaging yourself if you're that big up over a city, but does give it a militaristic look, like a tank that is painted that way. And the history of its Corsair name and the looming shadow visual of its cumulousness, it just gives this pirate ship an Imperial vibe.
It is a very cool looking ship.
Later explains that this pirate activity gives him a bad feeling about this when it comes to the rising threat of the First Order. Just seems like the pirate nation is being manipulated to chip away at the New Republic and to keep them distracted. Gorian Shard is the pirate king we met briefly in chapter 17, played by Nonso Anozi from Game of Thrones. And keeping in with the pirate tradition, he's like Davy Jones, or I guess in this case, a Greenbeard take on Redbeard or Blackbeard. Grief connects to the call with him, and I like how he takes a moment to steady himself and assume a commanding pose, you know, like we all do before signing into Zoom meetings. But Gorian Shard's hollow projection is set to huge, so he ends up just taking a higher status in this negotiation. And I love it. As Gorian talks, Grief's bust, which has been restored from chapter 17, it's now in the background, and it starts outside of the frame of Gorian's hollow projection, but moves closer and closer to his mouth, showing how Gorian is devouring Grief's interests here. Gorian scolds Grief about shooting his helmsman, and Grief says, "He shot first." It's a great nod to the famous Han and Greedo shootout in A New Hope, where Han shot first in the original version, but George Lucas changed it for the 1997 special edition so that Greedo shot first, leading to the who shot first, Han shot first debate among fans. Grief loves that he's under the protection of the New Republic, and Gorian just laughs that Navarro is an independent system, which, to be fair, is independence that Grief told Mando that he wanted in chapter 17 after they both talked shit about the New Republic. He's really reaping what he sowed. Gorian says,
he's trying to play it both ways.
And you can't bluff your way out of this one, Karga. Referring to the in-universe card game played by Han Solo and Lando Calrissian, Gorian rains cannon fire down on Navarro like, oh say, Thrawn upon Lothal and Rebels, creating a lifelong enemy in Ezra Bridger. I think this is going to come back up in the next few episodes as this series pivots to set up Ahsoka. After the initial bombardment, the gates of the city are already reduced back to rubble. The episode's title of The Pirate cuts to a tropical cove that looks like the kind of place a traditional pirate would plunder. But instead of a sea shanty sung by Barbosa, the closed captioning lists this music as psychedelic rock music played, which is just incredible. And I love the vocalization here. It reminds me of the absolute jam that we heard as we soared into Niamos on Andor. Remember that? We see an X-Wing departing this cove as a Y-Wing lands in a landing yard alongside several other Y-Wings, but they look a bit more sparse and less equipped than when we saw them in Return of the Jedi. Remember chapter 19? We learned that the New Republic is still in the process of decommissioning the Rebel Alliance fleet. Inside there are X-Wing and Y-Wing pilots in orange and in blue. Now the Blue Squadron was supposed to be decommissioned after the Battle of Scarif, but perhaps the New Republic era has brought them back. If you watch Rogue One closely, the Ghost was among that fleet in the Battle of Scarif. Zeb might have been there. That might be why Zeb is now part of this Blue Squadron. We see a few pilots playing a billiards game. This was from a removed scene from the 1977 Star Wars. This same game was played at the Toshi station. That was the same station that we visited in the pilot of the Book of Boba Fett. The teal drink they're drinking is Spotchka. That's the in-universe booze characters have been drinking in The Mandalorian, like in the bar in Mos Pelgo, and Fennec Shan and Boba Fett were drinking some when they took Jabba's throne from Bib Fortuna. Above the bar are various trophies of helmets and droid heads.
I didn't see those.
Intro sequence of every episode. You can see an Imperial probe droid.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Also an Imperial mouse droid, an RA-7 protocol droid head. There's some brown stormtrooper helmets, a black Imperial pilot helmet, scout trooper helmets, and behind the bar, the drink kegs are the same prop design from the Mos Eisley Cantina in A New Hope that would later be repurposed as the prop of the IG Assassin droid head. Sitting at the far end of the bar in the foreground, 3 big cameos, directors and producers of the series. Dave Filoni, who plays Trapper Wolf, Rick Famuyiwa, who plays Jib Dodger. Jib Dodger is probably a joke to like a jib on a set that Rick Famuyiwa might have been hit on the head with at some point. Jib Dodger. And then Deborah Chow, Sash Ketter. We saw these New Republic X-Wing pilots at the end of chapter 6 in season 1. And since then, Famuyiwa has now been promoted to executive producer alongside Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau.
I totally missed
Dave
all of
Filoni wears
those.
his iconic wide-brimmed hat, which I'm pretty sure is just glued to his head like Kevin Feige's ball cap is to his. And that Snivian bartender is played by Misty Rosas, who did the physical work of the Ugnaught Kuil in season 1. We catch up with Captain Carson Teva, the great Paul Sun-Hyun Lee, who wears a sick pilot jacket with patches, including one with the Rebel insignia on the sleeve and an orange patch with the freaking Rancor. Is he part of the Rancor squadron? Awesome! There's also a blue and red patch that might refer to his home planet of Adelphi. Seriously, my birthday is next week on April 7th, and since I can't go to Star Wars Celebration, it's all the way in the UK. If anyone wants to get me one of these jackets, I wear XL and I want that. Joining him is Zeb from Rebels.
I don't know who Zeb
is. He
is.
is in the show. So
I didn't watch this show yet.
Joined Harrison Dula, Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, Sabine Wren, and that little Chopper on the Ghost, and he will be the 4th character to show up in live action from the crew of the Ghost in the upcoming Ahsoka series, alongside Harrison Dula, Sabine Wren, and Ezra Bridger. And the fact that he shows up now in this New Republic pilot bar tells us that Hera will likely soon be introduced for this Ahsoka series. I did see the Ahsoka teaser at last year's celebration, and we do see that Twi'lek head from behind. His flight vest is stamped with Orbesh. That's hard to translate at first, but that's because it's upside down so that the pilot would be able to look down at his chest and read it. And it translates to pull to inflate. So our man Zeb is pulling a Marty McFly and wearing a life preserver in case his Y-Wing ever crash landed into the water. The VFX work on Zeb is just so good, and it's all in the details. Like, look closely at his face on this line.
Request permission to intercede. They haven't returned a dispatch in weeks. They're swamped.
Yeah, the frequent blinking, the way his nose wrinkles, and his temple twitches as he awkwardly has to remind his buddy how hopeless this is. Just a few subtle gestures along with the limited screen time and the well-matched naturalistic lighting, and yeah, that worn down, upside down Orbesh. All these details work together to make it feel like the guy is sitting here with us. And I'm not afraid to say, on Disney Plus, Lucasfilm has much better VFX than Marvel does. And I believe it's because Lucasfilm's animators work in-house. And these folks grew up with the animated versions of these characters and have spent their entire lives dreaming about bringing them into live action.
That's
Whereas
amazing
Marvel
work.
tends to outsource their VFX, and they pit these companies against each other, they work them to the bone, and all that creative exhaustion ends up showing. And Zeb says,
"Good luck. You're gonna need it."
Using the same intonation as Han Solo to Lando in Return of the Jedi.
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
So Teva goes to the New Republic building on
Steve Bloom is the voice of that guy, the Zeb character he's talking about. And Steve Bloom is a voice acting royalty. Like, he's in everything.
That's cool.
Absolutely everything. So it's pretty cool to see him voicing a live action character.
Coruscant and meets with Colonel Tuttle, Tim Meadows. That yellow astromech droid is the same one who visited Dr. Pershing's desk in Chapter 19. And the hard disks on that tray are the same prop design as the disc with the Death Star plans that was handed to Leia at the end of Rogue One. In fact, Greef Karga initially recording this message does feel a lot like Leia recording the message and handing it to
That's what I was thinking.
And Kane comes back and she butts in to mention that Navarro never actually signed the New Republic Charter. The New Republic Charter is actually brought up in Claudia Gray's Bloodline as a kind of constitution that outlines the role of positions positions like Chancellor and First Senator. Kuil actually brought it up in Chapter 7, referring to the whole Finders Keepers clause of him now being able to claim IG-11's body himself.
And stated as my own in accordance with the Charter of the New Republic.
Teva notices the Amnesty Program badge on Kane's uniform, which is an Orbesh A, and this scene quotes New Rockstars.
These events could all be connected. I think that's a bit of a leap.
Kane uses this as an example of why Navarro should learn to sign the charter, and Teva says by letting them suffer, and Kane smiles. Yeah, it's a performative gesture to show that she's not taking it personally, but also she didn't really have to hide a smile because she loves watching people suffer. Like notice how she says it often takes a new perspective before one can see the light, which totally feels like she's internally picturing Dr. Pershing seeing the colorful lights that she needs to torture him.
As she melted his brain.
She was captured, which is basically this show's version of...
You're talking about your court-ordered community service?
I don't need a judge to tell me to keep my community clean.
But he did, right?
Teva senses that this is all headed toward the First Order, saying there's something happening out there. All these events, it's not a coincidence. And before it becomes too big for them to act, it'll be too late. Captain Teva tracks down the Mandalorian covert, saying one of them served with him in the rebellion and snitched. And it was R5-D4. Remember, Pelimoto reminded us in Chapter 18 that R5 did serve the rebellion, which I had thought referred to that certain point of view story when R5 intentionally blew his motivator so that R2 could go with Luke, but I guess there was more history there. Din hears Teva's request to help Greef, and he makes his case to the rest of the covert, carrying the armorer's hammer as a kind of talking stick. I love the way they repurpose it from a forging tool to a speaker's gavel. Din acknowledges that many of these guys once fought Greef in Chapter 3 of the series, and Din declares, perhaps it is time for us to live in the light once again, a place where we are welcome so that our culture may flourish and our children may feel what it is to play in the sunlight. And I love how Grogu smiles at that because our boy just wants to play.
So cute.
But Din is suddenly
And not get eaten by crocogators.
Because some would say it's really their culture to be shielded from the sunlight by always having to wear their helmets. But I love how later in this episode, the armorer will see this light when Bo-Katan is framed in a beam of sunlight and is told to remove her helmet. I like how Paz Vizsla doesn't just rise up to just signal to Din that he's on his side. He only speaks because he heard all those nervous murmurs and he knows that Din needed him to win over anyone on the fence. By starting the speech with the antithesis, he smartly gets the attention of the detractors until he reframes his whole argument as reasons why to save Greef.
Because we are Mandalorians.
Rhetorically, this is the same tactic McConaughey's character uses in A Time to Kill, explaining why Samuel L. Jackson was justified in killing a Klansman who raped his daughter by telling the jury to imagine what happened to the girl with vivid detail, and then closes with, I want you to picture that little girl. And now imagine she's white. Now, I guess it's not as artful or as powerful of a speech here, but you get the idea. Paz says that Bo-Katan didn't give up on my son's life even when the rest of us did, signaling that even he gave up a bit on his son's survival prospects. As Bo-Katan shows them her comrade class fighter transport, she faces the shoulder that bears the Mythostar signet on that new armor piece of the armor just cast for her last episode, appealing to the thing that unites all of them instead of turning to show her Night Owl history that actually broke off from the Death Watch that these guys are derived from. They exit hyperspace and the planet of Navarro zips in at them, a visual that will always look so rad to me. And we see how these drunken pirates have now overtaken Navarro, a poor astromech droid just bumping into the rubble until he sparks, just offing himself because he hates it here. It really is like these pirates are drunkenly singing, yo, ho, yo, ho, a pirate's life for me, as they've overtaken Isla Tesoro. And you know, that ride seems like it's all fun and games, but we forget how those people's lives were ruined. Those pirates execute the mayor by drowning them in a well. They abuse the donkey. It's not okay. And here we see how that includes them retaking the school that Vane wanted to get drunk in before. You can see that same starboard that the protocol droid used in Chapter 12 while Grogu was eating those blue cookies. Gorian Shard has a first mate with a striped shirt and red bandana who's clearly modeled to look like Smee from Peter Pan. Bro,
Hilarious.
Peter Pan and Star Wars. That ain't Star Wars, bro. Greef radios to Mando that they got him out number 10-1, and Mando tricks one snub fighter to crash into another and says, I like those odds. A nod to Han Solo again.
The possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
Bo-Katan drops the first wave to clear the street, and the Anzellans say, everybody come and look. After those Kawaki monkey lizards got shot by the pirates earlier, now one points to the plaza to warn the Mandalorians, telling us that these things are far smarter than we realized, and just makes it kind of disturbing that Jawas were roasting them on spits in the pilot episode. Paz lays down some heavy repeating blaster fire, but they get bogged down by a Trandoshan pirate with a cannon in Greef's suite. Meanwhile, up above, Din's N1 sends a stump fighter into the Corsair, and Gorian Shard shouts, Dank Ferric! You know, the recurring Star Wars profanity.
Dank Ferric!
The armorer gets into the suite and shows that forging hammers ain't just for taking turns to speak. She clubs them one by one and uses her tongs to pinch a nyctospinal column. Youch! It's like Old Man Marley taking out the wet bandits.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Saying he'll do it in a puffer pig's eye. Puffer pigs are creatures that sniff out minerals that we saw in Rebels. Din and Bo-Katan are able to bring down the Corsair.
That was such a beautiful
This is the same sound
scene.
effect made by the Star Destroyer that crashes into the Death Star in Return of the Jedi.
Not as good.
Now this slams into the side of an active volcano, and we see the ground quake. It's a seismic event that I would be nervous around anywhere with hot springs and active lava flows, but it doesn't matter. They all cheer, and we hear those Anzellans shout, "It's gonna be okay!" Which is why the start cheering.
They're celebrating.
Because that's all we can really hope for, right? That it's just gonna be okay.
I think
now,
they were
in this cheering
dancing.
crowd,
The
I love what I
Anzellans
call
are so
extra
cool.
extras. Like this super psyched out person in front of the N1, because if you've ever been on a production set, for sound purposes, extras often have to emote and cheer silently, and they'll fill in the sound effect later during the dubbing process. So this person is just really screaming silently here.
Thank you.
Grief declares that the territory from the lava flats to Bullock Canyon will go to the Mandalorians. This is a wonderful nod to Jeremy Bullock, who died relatively recently, and he played the physical performance of Boba Fett in the original trilogy. Between this and Ahmed Best last week, I really like how they're showing their love to the cast. Paz escorts Bo-Katan back into the sewers where they once hid, and we hear Ludwig Göransson's moody electric guitar strings from the pilot episode. Bo-Katan and the armor recall the Great Forge of Mandalore. The armor says it was large and ornate, and the air rang with the music of 100 hammers. To her, hammering is music, as in Chapter 17, the strikes of the hammer were synced with Joseph Shirley's drum music. Their armor compares the Great Forge to this simple one. Now, both serve the same purpose. She's coming to terms with the fact that the ornate ceremonial trappings of the Mandalorian's past are not the way for the future of the Mandalorian people, and that open-minded tolerance will attract greater numbers. That is why she tells Bo to remove her helmet, not to trap her, but to allow her to be a Mandalorian in her own way, trusting that the mythosaur presenting itself to her was a more valid sign and portent. The armorer says, "I was taught that the mythosaur existed only in legends, and yet you saw it. It is a sign that the next age is upon us." Yes, the phrase "only in legends," another double meaning, as much of what we know about the mythosaur really comes from legends or expanded universe literature. The armorer joins a helmetless Bo-Katan, saying that she walks in both worlds and can bring all tribes together. Paz Vizsla turns to Din Djarin uncertain, as the two of them previously dueled over this question of over being an apostate. So when the armorer pledges to retake Mandalore, I don't think it's a false plot to set up Bo-Katan to fail again. The drum music swells with pride. It casts her at the end of a redemption arc. But my question to you is, does this redemption feel earned to you as a viewer? Isn't it a bit odd for the armorer to take Bo-Katan at her word when it comes to seeing the mythosaur? And wasn't it Din and Paz who really gave better speeches here and did more to win this battle? Like, don't get me wrong, I really like Bo-Katan. I think she could be a great leader. It just feels like the armorer is weirdly rushed and eager to embrace her. Like she automatically baptized her. She breaks the helmet rules for her. In fact, I'm now half wondering if the armorer might secretly be Bo-Katan's sister Satine, who somehow survived. Somehow Satine returned. I know, it's crazy. It's my batshit reach theory. In fact, I hope it's wrong. If this
Mephisto confirmed.
Carson Teva ends this episode coming upon the Ghost Ship, a New Republic Lambda-class shuttle. Its hull breached. Lieutenant Reed, who he radios with, is, as before, played by Max Lloyd-Jones, who is a stand-in double for the de-aged Luke Skywalker in Chapter 16. The Astromech probe scans the shuttle with an eerie planar beam that looks exactly like the light in James Cameron's Aliens when Ripley is found in cryosleep. Now remember, Grief Karga told us in Chapter 17 that Moff Gideon was escorted personally by Cara Dune, who he said then went off to join another division. But I guess it is possible that one of the corpses in the shuttle could be Cara Dune, and that, like Poochie, Cara Dune died on the way back to her home planet. He notices a chunk of Beskar alloy in the wall. He assumes Mandalorians did this. Now, despite the fact that there are other Mandalorian tribes out there, some may be more vengeful, I just don't think Mandalorians did this, because Mandalorians would have just killed Gideon instead of extracting him and kidnapping him.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think any Mandalorian would leave any Beskar behind.
Yeah, there's so many sources of
I think this
Beskar.
was whoever bombed Bo-Katan's home. Someone framing the Mandalorians. Someone actively hostile to the Mandalorians. Perhaps Thrawn, who might be trying to frame or trying to aggravate Sabine Wren, who is a Mandalorian from Cronest. Next episode's supposed to be a big one. I think we're going to see Thrawn in it. And I believe Grand Admiral Thrawn could prove to be the ultimate pirate of this episode's title. Hey, remember to subscribe to our new channel, The Deep Dive. And
how does he know that?
Merch at nerdriot.shop. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EAVoss. Follow New Rockstars and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Wow, he talks so fast.
Yeah, there was a lot in
details,
there.
Yeah.
kind of feel like he might be onto something with his questions about the armor and Bo-Katan. It did feel a little quick.
Yeah.
And when she asked her to remove her helmet, I thought it was some kind of a trick.
Me too.
To start with. But then everything kind of worked out. But it does feel a little fast. Like it does feel a little unearned, like he said. But I don't know. I mean, we've been wondering who the armorer is since the first season of this thing. We don't really know who the armorer is, and it's a female, so it could maybe be Sabine, who's Bo-Katan's sister.
We'll see.
And that would be amazing. I haven't seen. Neither one of us have seen the show. I think it's the cartoon show Legends, that the characters that they're talking about, Zeb and these other people, and the Ghost, which is their ship.
Right.
I haven't seen that show, so I didn't know who Zeb was.
But the connection that we have is from the what do you call that?
From the Bad Batch.
The Bad Batch.
Which is a different time.
I know.
But
there's some connection.
Yeah, there's definitely connections all throughout these, because the Bad Batch happens in a time way before this. And so whatever the stuff they're doing in their show can affect this stuff, right? And so we see Coruscant in the Bad Batch, and it's different today. And we've seen a lot of Coruscant in this show, which was really cool. Yeah, probably the most interesting analysis, I think, was what's up with Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
Because I think it'd be very cool if she took off and led everybody. But I don't know that she's earned it.
Yeah,
I think you might be right. So
thank you again for tuning into our channel. Don't forget to give your love and support to Mandalorian. If you like to watch The Mandalorian, it's on Disney Plus. And also the breakdown, I forgot his name.
New Rockstars with Eric Voss.
I'm sorry, my brain is...
Yeah, links in the description below.
Yes, we'll put the links in the description below. Thank you for your love and support to our channel. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.